My name is Keegan Arthur, and today I'm going to be presenting to you racial profiling. Now, within this presentation, we're going to aim to answer a couple of questions. The first one being, what is racism versus systemic racism? And is there any correlation between race and crime? Let's go ahead and start by answering the first question, what is racism? Well, racism is going to be whenever an individual is oppressed, marginalized, or facing inequality due to their race. Now you may be wondering, well, how is racism shown today? Well, it's shown through a series of subtle acts. These are what are known as microaggression and microassaults. Let's go ahead and define those. Microaggression is going to be the brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages to people of color because they belong to a specific minority group. The microaggressions can range from microassaults, microinsults, and microinvalidation. So what are microassaults? Well, microassaults are going to be verbal and nonverbal attacks that are intended to hurt another person that can be done through name calling, avoidant behavior, or purposeful discriminatory actions. Some examples could include calling someone colored or even Oriental. Now, what is systemic racism? Well, it's going to be very similar to the definition we just went over, except for the fact that it differs from racism on an individual level. Now, we see systemic racism in a couple different locations. Okay, we see it in institutions, universities and colleges, the workplace, and even political hierarchy. Now we're going to try and answer the question above, is race related to crime, through a couple of different key points. These key points are the racial and ethnic criminal narrative in US news media, how the news media affects public opinion, and how the effects of just one man goes to show that white privilege does exist. The racial and ethnic criminal narrative in US news media. Now, it's no doubt that Black Americans are being overrepresented as perpetrators of crime in the US media, especially regarding violent crimes. Now, they do this by amplifying the belief that Blacks are more threatening than their white counterparts. Well, how exactly do they achieve doing this? Well, first we have the mugshot. Now, in fact, the media seems to display the mugshots of people of color much more often than their white counterparts. And just as the saying goes, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Because of this, it gives the audience of the news media the ability to come up with their own opinions about the individual that they are seeing on the screen. The media is often depicting Black suspects in police custody more often than whites. And finally, we see how the media worsens the racial tensions between Black and white communities as they specifically perpetrate a narrative of white victimization. How the news media affects public opinion. Now, the news media has the power to greatly influence the opinions of those who tune in to watch every day. In fact, if we go ahead and take a look at a study that was conducted in 2012, it showed that the participants who consumed just 1 minute of negative news or entertainment regarding Latinos were much more likely to relate Latinos to those who are unintelligent. And to make matters worse, these participants did not have this idea to start with. In fact, before the process, the participants had believed that Latinos were smart individuals. So it's so clear that when we watch the news, it can become very easily to believe what is being said and to later agree with that belief. Now, in the same study, it also concluded that the viewers of Fox News and other talk shows that are often seen as conservative we're more likely to look at the Latinos with negativity, although they are less likely to know one personally. Now, this goes ahead and brings us to the criminal justice system. Another study in Philadelphia was able to conclude that Black defendants were 3.9 times more likely to receive the death penalty than those who committed the same crime and were white. Is it not clear that the media has a massive effect of the viewpoints of people of color? Now, it is very clear that racism is not of the past. In fact, it is still lurking in the shadows of today's society. It continues to be bred into the young minds of men and women that occupy our world today. And an unfortunate example I want to bring out that everybody has been aware of is the death of George Floyd. It was on May 25th that Mr. Floyd had been arrested and then later killed. You may be wondering, well, what could a man have done that was so horrific, so terrible that the only option for George was death? Well, for those who don't know the story, Mr. Floyd had the authorities called on him shortly after he had left the convenience store. You see, they had believed that Mr. Floyd paid for cigarettes with a counterfeit $20 bill. Now, with the tragic death of George Floyd, it has opened up the opportunity to reveal the existence of white privilege. Now, there's an example I want to show that really shows the white privilege of men in today's society. It was on May 15th that a group of white armed individuals stormed the state capitol building in demand of the government that they open up their stores so that they could get their haircuts and eat at their favorite restaurants. Now this begs the question, why didn't the police arrest these people for carrying guns, especially inside the state capitol building? Well, if we go ahead and review the Second Amendment, it brings out that they have the right to carry a weapon. Now, the connection I'm trying to make is that their right to carry a weapon is not essential to survive, but to breathe freely is what every human individual needs. And not even Mr. Floyd was given that right. White privilege at its finest. Now, in conclusion, it is clear that race does have a correlation to crime, but not because the color of your skin determines whether or not you're going to create a crime, but the fact that in today's society, the people choose to believe what they